Hello, I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us for Honoring Black History, Sharing Our Stories. For the next 30 minutes, we are coming to you from the Smith Robertson Museum and Cultural Center here in Jackson. If you haven't visited us here yet, this place has quite a history.
I'm so excited you guys are here.
These school children are getting a history lesson from what was known as the West Jackson Colored School. It was bought by a man who would name the school after himself. A school that was a gem in the community that provided jobs for the faculty and a structured learning environment for the students.
Well, historically, we were a school first in the 1800s. It was the Smith Robertson School for colored pupils. That should tell you historically, just by saying the word colored, how old we are. But it was started by a former slave named Smith Robertson, who came from Alabama after the Civil War and came here to Jackson and bought the property, bought a facility here, and named the school after himself.
There was pride for the students who attended the school, and they came from different age groups.
So the ages and the grades staggered up, you know. We had several rooms that could be used for certain grades, but it was such a pride and joy of the community. And it remains that today. You can look at some of the photographs of the faculty then and the staff and the students. And we get people coming back today who remember their grandparents coming to school here or teaching here, and they look at the photographs, and that's the real joy we have today of still being open as a museum.
The school was closed in 1971 and reopened as a museum in 1984. As a museum, the focus is on Jackson history.
You know, the beauty of the Smith Robertson Museum is that we start with the whole Jackson story. We say, if you want to learn about Jackson history, come here first. Other museums offer more of a comprehensive outlook on the national scope, the state scope, but this is all Jackson focused. So for us, our pride and joy as far as exhibits has to be the Medgar Evers Gallery, because it was curated with the help of Mr. Evers' family.
Pre-COVID, about 15,000 people visited the museum a year. They're slowly getting back to those numbers. If you really want to learn about Jackson history, stop by for a visit and carve out about 2 hours of your time. In a room much like this one, our first story tonight takes us on a medical journey to the Taborian Hospital in Mount Bayou. It opened back in 1942, where the entire staff, including doctors and nurses, were black. 12 News reporter Leah Williams traveled to the Delta community founded by former slaves, where numerous people received medical care.
The Taborian Hospital was built by the International Order of 12 Knights and Daughters of Tabor, a black fraternal organization. Its chief grand mentor for the Mississippi jurisdiction, P.M. Smith, was inspired by the state's first hospital for black patients, the Afro-American Sons and Daughters Hospital in Yazoo City that opened in 1928. Smith was determined to build a similar hospital in the Mississippi Delta.
So he went to his organization and said, "This is my strategic plan. Let's do this." And they said no. So he was undaunted. He said, "We're going to continue to go back and ask this organization." After about 10 years, they said, okay.
Member donations funded the $100,000 in construction costs, and on February 1st, 1942, the Taborian Hospital opened its doors in Mount Bayou.
During that time, I was a little girl, born in 1948. We didn't have to go very far to come to see the doctor. It was right here in Mount Bayou community. And most of us, we had to share crops, and we did chopping and picking cotton. And so just to come uptown from where we was living at, the hospital was right there.
Black Mississippians were often denied adequate access to health care, which is why Smith pushed for the new hospital.
There's the story of the 6-year-old who was in the backyard burning trash, and her dress caught on fire, and she was burned terribly, and her parents took her to a hospital outside of Mount Bayou, Mississippi. At this hospital, they were told to go into the basement, where it's very dark, where it's very cold, and wait on the doctor to come down after he's seen his patients. So think about this 6-year-old who's burned very badly and waiting. She died.
The Taborian Hospital had 42 beds and 2 operating rooms where tens of thousands of black patients were treated from all over the country.
During that time, people was coming from everywhere to see the doctors. And my mother was here. My mother was one of the nurses.
Members of the Knights and Daughters of Tabor were able to pay into a system similar to today's health maintenance organizations. Members were guaranteed a certain number of annual doctor visits. Non-members were also treated for a higher cost.
An organization, and the organization that they were members of, they would have to go to see the doctors so many times a year. Not because they were sick, but to provide them service to make sure that they stayed healthy.
Not only were patients able to get fair treatment, but many were also seeing representation in the medical field for the first time since it was an all-Black staff.
Again, health equity is important, but to see something that you could be, the children could be, to be doctors, to be nurses, that was very important.
Dr. T.R.M. Howard was the chief surgeon at the Taborian Hospital for 5 years. Herman Johnson Sr. worked directly under Dr. Howard in the late 1940s and says keeping the doors open was always a challenge.
They were saying that the rooms were too small, and some other things they were saying that we'd have to increase and do better. Now they had hospital in Shelby run by white doctors, worse shape than this one, but they stayed open.
The Taborian Hospital closed in 1983 due to a lack of funding. It was restored and reopened as an urgent care clinic in 2016, but closed again. With rural hospitals statewide still facing financial issues today, Mound Bayou residents hope to see the Taborian Hospital open its doors again one day.
It would be good if we could get this hospital back open again, but it's good to see it's still standing. And it's being taken care of.
Thank you, Leah. Coming up next, we'll travel to Natchez, Mississippi, where new historical markers are unveiled, honoring Black history, sharing our stories. We'll be right back after this break. Former colleagues of Dr. Frida Bush are remembering all she did to help women in the capital city. Dr. Bush died January 15th, surrounded by her family. She was an OBGYN in Jackson from 1987 until she retired in 2017. Our condolences to her family. Dr. Frida Bush was 75 years old. Welcome back to our program. Recently, a ceremony was held in Natchez where 27 African-American historical markers were unveiled.
I'm going home to live with God.
It's been a lot of hard work to get to this point. The unveiling of 27 African-American historical markers that will be placed at sites throughout the city of Natchez. The markers will allow visitors to have a self-guided tour of local African-American history. Mayor Dan Gibson says they are finally telling the whole story.
And I'm so grateful to be in a city that celebrates our diversity, that celebrates our history, commemorates our history, recognizes that even the history that is not good is still our history. And it all has been used, I believe, by the hand of God to bring about a perfect recipe that only He can concoct. And that is the recipe called you and me.
Some of the notable sites include the home that writer Richard Wright grew up in. Valencia Hall's family has owned the home for decades and says it's important to tell these stories.
So we are about unity, not division, not a racial divide. We are one Natchez. And these 27 historical markers to Black Natchezians are continuing to tell the story. And we tell it, the bitterness, the pain, and the beauty of Black citizens of Natchez.
Dr. John Banks was the first African-American doctor in Natchez. He also owned the first black bank in the city with his colleague, and his house was critical to the civil rights movement. The Banks House is now a museum.
When you talk about having the first black physician in Natchez, located on St. Catherine Street, that we consider to be the Wall Street of Natchez for African Americans, then we think that this is significant.
Natchez was the second busiest slave trade market in the Deep South, and the Forks of the Road was a spot where it all happened. It's now been added to the National Park Service because of its national significance.
Well, what's important is that there be a place where people can come and comprehend what happened in that location. It is a site of conscience. And so people need to come and learn the facts, but they also need a way to comprehend the enormity of the facts and to give pause and really take in the magnitude of what built this country.
The city's Public Works Department will install the markers at each site over the next several months. Coming up next, the story of a Hattiesburg war hero takes flight on the silver screen. The Museum of Mississippi History and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, better known as the Two Mississippi Museums, is celebrating its 5th anniversary. Since opening in December 2017, more than 500,000 people have toured the museum. And the Mississippi section are interactive exhibits and artifacts designed to take visitors back in time to experience stories of Mississippians over thousands of years. And over in the Civil Rights section are 8 galleries that focus on the years between 1945 to 1976, when Mississippi was ground zero for the Civil Rights Movement. Welcome back to Honoring Black History, sharing our stories, coming to you from Smith Robertson Museum and Cultural Center in Jackson. Our next story centers on a Hattiesburg man whose life as a Navy aviator has gone from a book to Hollywood. The motion picture Devotion tells of a friendship that developed between Navy aviators Tom Huttner and Hattiesburg native Jesse Brown. Brown, who grew up picking cotton, is the first African-American Navy aviator who died during the Korean War after his plane was hit by enemy gunfire in 1950. Jonathan Majors plays Jesse Brown.
I don't think after this we will reference the Korean War as the forgotten war, you know, and Jesse stands right beside the Tuskegee Airmen in people's memory and in people's hopefully esteem. Based on what we did in that film, I have no doubt.
His life is memorialized at the African American Military History Museum in Hattiesburg, where a reception was held recently with family, friends, and cast from the movie to honor him and others who have served our country. Pamela Knight is Jesse Brown's daughter.
The fact of a friendship that can become a devoted friendship towards another person, and that no matter what your differences are, that you can become friends, and everything doesn't have to be something that ends in violence or whatever.
His granddaughter, Jessica Knight Henry, says they're happy that his story is finally being told so the whole world can see.
We grew up always knowing like his story and what he meant to the community, but it's very powerful to be in this moment and see just how much and what it means to people beyond Hattiesburg and Mississippi and the world. So we're so excited that he's getting his moment.
Tim Henson served in the Navy and calls Jesse Brown his hero. He's also a good friend of his daughter, Pamela.
These 2 pilots were from different walks of life, but Jesse, with his sheer determination, became an ace pilot. He was killed in action December the 4th, 1950. Thomas Huttner crashed his plane trying to save him. They are just amazing pilots. They were both just dedicated to the service. The history of these guys for the United States and for the Navy is just amazing.
Christina Jackson plays Jesse's wife and says this movie is about love, friendship, and brotherhood.
I know I cried. I cried reading the script, and Daisy is introduced as Daisy, Jesse's wife, his heartbeat, his anthem. And that made me sit up a little bit more and pay a little bit more attention. The way that her scenes are, they're so beautiful. The way that she is so beautiful. The letters that he wrote to her are just, they break your heart. And so to be the one who gets the chance to be the Daisy to Jonathan's Jesse, it's nothing like it.
J.D. Dillard is the director of the film and hopes you not only walk away with a history lesson about Jesse Brown, but also a message.
It's really a story about mutual understanding, you know, and how difficult it really is to be there for someone in the way that they need you there for them. So I hope, you know, as the film ends and the credits roll, you know, that's something that you take away.
For his actions, Brown was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Purple Heart Medal, and the Air Medal. Jonathan Majors will co-star in Creed 3 coming out next month. Coming up after the break, the first black DJ on the air in McGee. Stay with us. If you want to know about a certain time period, just listen to the most popular songs of that era. While the style of music and social climate may have been changing, radio stations were slowly integrating. And in McGee, Mississippi, James Myers would spark another change. Here's Kayla Thompson.
You're listening to the sound of Southern hospitality from WSJC, McGee, Mississippi.
In the 1970s, WSJC was heard all around McGee, but some say the station wasn't truly inclusive until James Lavelle Myers joined.
You know, you done had a hard day's work. It's time to relax. You got Lavelle playing your favorites. Got Teddy. You're gonna turn out the lights.
And for some longtime listeners like Melinda Green, it's easy to remember the first time she heard someone who sounded like her.
You listen to WSJC, waiting on Ted Swap Shop to tell you what he had on sale. And we came in one evening and we heard a different song, and we're like, okay, who is this on this radio? And we realized that it was him, and they started playing black music, and all the teenagers was calling in. It was awesome.
Myers says he never felt concerned about being the only person of color at the radio station, and he felt honored to provide joy to listeners professionally after learning the ropes at Piney Woods.
Enjoyed it. It was a time of my life that I will forever cherish. Yeah, and like I say, and I'm forever thankful for the people.
And people are thankful for pioneers like him.
We're able to learn from them, and because they did some amazing things, and this was before technology, so this was more personality driven, you know, back in the day. And I'm very thankful for people like him, because I've worked with many of those guys throughout my career.
It's been years since Myers was on air.
They done went high tech.
And things may be a little different, but his desire to make a positive impact on others is still strong.
God has been good, and I am just continuing to try to do my best and hope that people that I meet or somehow or another you do something to uplift their day.
In McGee, Kayla Thompson, 12 News.
Although the music industry has changed over time, Myers encourages artists and DJs to never miss a beat and to keep going. Honoring Black history, sharing our stories. We'll be right back after the break. Congressman Benny Thompson is the longest-serving African-American elected official in the state of Mississippi and the lone Democrat in the Mississippi congressional delegation. Thompson, who represents Mississippi's 2nd District, also chaired the Committee on Homeland Security and the chair of the U.S. House Select Committee on the January 6th attack. Thompson is a native of Bolton, Mississippi, and is a graduate of Tougaloo College in Jackson. Finally tonight, as many families make plans to travel for summer vacations later this year, there was a time not long ago when Black families had to take extra precautions before hitting the road. Not long ago, the 2 Mississippi museums hosted a Smithsonian traveling exhibition about the Negro Travelers Green Book, which served as a guide for African Americans traveling across the U.S. during the Jim Crow era. It was first published in 1936 by Victor Green and provided information about hotels, restaurants, and other businesses that would welcome Black families during segregated times. That's all for our show. We hope you are inspired or perhaps learned something about our history. We want to thank the staff here at the Smith Robertson Museum for hosting us. We hope you plan a visit here soon. Now, for our entire 12 News production team, I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for tuning in, and make it a safe and enjoyable weekend.